The animus refers to the archetype of the masculine within the psyche. Originally, the word animus referred to the unconscious masculine within a woman's psyche, but Erich Neumann showed that consciousness utilizes the masculine portions of the psyche, regardless of biological gender, and so even in women, their consciousness is oriented and directed by their animus. Masculinity is a pre-existent idea within the psyche, but it also encompasses those ideas and characteristics which are more predominant in men than women. Such traits include physical strength and athleticism, aggressiveness and competitiveness, logical and rational thinking, emotional stoicism and control, leadership and dominance, independence and self-reliance. The archetypally masculine can be subdivided into many more archetypes, which direct this masculine energy in particular ways, usually based on life situations, which humans will inevitably encounter. It's hard to say how many archetypes there are, or how distinct they are from each other. In fact, if you think that archetypes can be neatly and discreetly divided from each other, you don't understand the psyche, where divisions and boundaries are less firm. We can, however, point to the definite existence of certain archetypes, even if the lines between them are blurred. The father archetype is activated in situations wherever an authority figure guides and directs us. This acts as a sort of confinement upon our behaviors, as we must follow the rules and ideals imposed upon us, and this confinement plays a role in shaping the structure of our own egos. When we are young, the father archetype is projected onto authority figures, usually our fathers, but also any authority figure who happens to be present. The archetype compels us to obey them, to follow their commands, and to solidify the rules they teach us. At first, an external authority plays this role, but eventually a person's own ego will take on the role of directing the psyche and confining its energy so that it can be utilized towards a more directed purpose. The archetype of the king, which isn't necessarily separate from the father, is a more generalized expression of the same fundamental principle, as the king serves as a more collective, archetypal father for an entire culture. The capacity to project the archetype onto an authority figure is balanced by the capacity to embody the father or king and become a leader who guides others and transmits canonized cultural values to subsequent generations. Therefore, this archetype is also responsible for our own desire to lead others and teach them our beliefs, thus perpetuating and transmitting moral ideals. The ego, because it is more closely aligned with the masculine, becomes the representative of the king within the psyche, and this archetypal predisposition encourages us to play the role of the leader. The ego's consolidation of the ideals imposed upon it allows the ego to eventually direct itself, rather than requiring an authority figure at all times, i.e., the ego becomes the father or king within the psyche. For example, your dad may teach you to stop at red lights. The projection of the father archetype compels you to obey this rule, which becomes fixed in your psyche as a part of your spirit. Years later, you stop at red lights without being conscious of the origins of this specific rule, and thus, it becomes a part of the personal unconscious. This is why Jung stated that the animus consists of opinions that very often have the character of solid convictions that are not lightly shaken, or of principles whose validity is seemingly unassailable. These opinions act as crystallized rules, and our ability to determine truth in new situations usually uses these opinions as their fundamental axioms. Allied with this concept is the concept of spirit, which you can understand better by watching this video. A person's spirit, in a Jungian sense, refers to their higher principles, that part of their psyche which is gifted by cultural values, imposed by authority figures through the father archetype, rather than being bestowed by nature. Your moral beliefs form your spirit, and these principles are crystallized within your psyche, and your ego generally obeys these principles insofar as they have been integrated. Very often, these rules and obligations fall into the sphere of the personal unconscious, where they nevertheless guide the ego along certain behaviors, as the ego becomes the upholder of these beliefs within the psyche. The projection of the father archetype onto an authority figure is usually the first source of these canonized ideas. As Jung writes, "It struck me that a certain kind of father complex has a spiritual character, so to speak, in the sense that the father image gives rise to statements, actions, tendencies, impulses, opinions, etc. In men, a positive father complex very often produces a credulity with regard to autonomy and a distinct willingness to bow down before all spiritual dogmas and values." The wise old man is the archetypal expression of spirit, since, according to Jung, The old man thus represents knowledge, reflection, insight, wisdom, cleverness, and intuition on the one hand, and on the other, moral qualities such as goodwill and readiness to help, which make his spiritual character sufficiently plain. The wise old man, just like the father, is the cultural upholder of spirit. The rules and opinions which masculinity helps to crystallize also become the basis of future directed thinking. In essence, these rules form the fundamental axioms which underlie our ability to reason and use logic in novel situations. In your own psyche are certain rules, assumptions, and opinions which secretly guide your consciousness, and building upon this knowledge allows you to derive higher wisdom. The transmission of spiritual principles and wisdom is the mechanism of the wise old man, and this allows a culture to preserve and pass on the wisdom it has gathered. This is why the wise old man, the father, and the king are all related to each other, being archetypal expressions of the same fundamental masculine principle within the psyche. They represent authority, leadership, spiritual principles, and wisdom. Spirit is one mechanism, which allows the ego to direct itself in a purposive manner, but I believe the energy for this drive has a different source, namely the warrior archetype. This is an ancient mechanism, which is a reflection of the fact that the world is immensely dangerous, and we need to have the capacity to fight present in our psyche if we ever face potential dangers. You can feel this archetype whenever you are hurt, either emotionally or physically, as an instinctive reaction to attack the apparent source of this pain. This archetype allows us to fight whenever we are threatened, but it also gives us the capacity to choose to fight for our own benefit, such as hunting or raiding. The drive and aggression supplied by the masculine warrior archetype gives us the ability to narrow our experience, to filter everything until we are only left with that window of experience which is relevant to our current goals. Like a hunter honing in on its prey, the warrior drive allows us to narrowly focus our attention towards the fulfillment of the ego's intention. This is especially the case whenever you are tasked with doing something you don't want to do. The aggressive drive within you is able to push yourself, allowing humanity to go beyond itself. The hero is also an expression of this tendency, but the hero's journey ultimately serves as a tool for the ego to go its own way, rather than being the purveyor of the old system of morals imposed upon it. The hero thus becomes its own father, and the ego becomes the king of the psyche, the authoritative voice from within, which seeks the fulfillment of a higher spiritual purpose. These archetypes give the animus and masculinity its defining features, and allows us to use our masculine drive in purposive ways. The human psyche has found a way to use its fundamental architecture to go beyond itself and rise towards the spiritual heights. If any of these archetypes don't develop in the optimum manner, it can lead to psychological stagnation. The energy provided by the masculine is best channeled in a socially appropriate way so that our archetypal nature can exist harmoniously with our spiritual principles. Thanks for watching, have a good day, and may good luck always come your way.